financial security. Consider this.
Well, good morning and welcome to this week's Consider This program. Happy to have you along. Hey, you're going to notice a few things different. One, I am not in my normal Financial Enhancement Group t-shirt. I'm in my Santa, and I do believe, maybe a little larger than it has been in the past, but I do believe in our country, our economy, our market. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those things today. I am missing my co-host, Angie Kinzer, is not with us today, feeling a little under the weather. So we brought in one of my favorite people, an associate advisor. Daren Hardesty is with us tonight. He'll be the air traffic controller, bringing in your questions. Dean Huddleston, our Social Security advisor, if you will, our lead advisor, senior advisor in the Lafayette office, but certainly our expert in terms of Social Security, is the one who's monitoring the social media questions for those of you who are sending them in. And those of you who are listening to WIBC, obviously you know that you can watch the show live on our website, or videoed, taped, if you will, archived. Or watch us live on Tuesday evenings from 5 to 6 p.m. So for now, it is Daren and I, and tonight's topic, assigned by Angie, is a plan with a purpose. Mr. Hardesty,
Yes,
so
sir.
glad to have you along.
Thank you for having me. It's I'll do my best to fill in for Angie, but it's hard to replace Angie. So everybody forgive me if I do not keep up as well as Angie does.
You'll do fine. You will do fine. The difference is, Angie, and for those of you, and Daren, you may not even know this, one of my best friends is Marshall Kramer. He works at Ed Martin. He's been a mechanic for, I don't know as long as I have known him, right? And I was in his wedding close to 30 years ago, if not 30 now. And when I would drive home from my Lafayette office, Marshall would tell me what I did wrong on the radio show.
As he should.
Thank you. And so I invited Marshall to join the show, right? And so we had a blast. And he was, I'm Joe, and he was the average Joe. And Angie gets to play the average Joe, if you will, or the average Angie as she asks the questions. You, on the other hand, are very, very well versed in the things that we're talking about tonight. So this is going to be a different show for you folks. You're going to get a different flavor of what FEG is and understand more about the 29 people that we have that function and facilitate our planning process as a team, because it truly takes every single one of us to be able to get the job done. This is not a solo shop by any stretch of the imagination. And when I look at my life and how much you've been able to change it over the last year, I can do nothing but say thank you. You started your new career in the middle of a pandemic. That takes guts by its own, not just being a baseball coach. Hey, you're listening to Consider This program. I am Joe Clark, your host, missing Angie Kinzer, but along with Daren Hardesty. Stay tuned. We got a lot for you with a plan for a purpose. Hey, guys, appreciate you on the streaming side. For those of you that are watching, we'll continue to do our best to try to give you good insight and good information and things that you need. It is a plan with a purpose week. And there's going to be one that gets emotional for me. The last 3 or 4 weeks have been tough. And I will do my best on the radio to cover that. Or not uncover, I guess, however you want to look at it. But there's some things that we need to talk about that I think are beneficial for you guys. So you got a question or comment, make sure that you either go on our Facebook page. You can do it there. I know Barb is monitoring and having a watch party on her side. I know Dean is watching our website and Facebook, and we're just happy to have you all along. Daren and I are here to do the best we can to answer your questions. So, buddy, what is our first topic?
It's geared around 401ks. So what do you do? What is a plan you should have when you start thinking about taking distributions from that 401k?
So a plan with a purpose is the theme, and we're going to talk about 401ks. And do you just want to talk about distributions, or do you want to talk about the 3 phases of finance and a 401k?
I think we can dive into each phase and then key in a little bit more on the distribution
All right,
side.
so
how it differs maybe from an IRA.
So for the podcast people, I would lay this out then as, if you're going to have a plan and the plan is going to have purpose and you get to use a 401k, here are the things you need to think about going in, while you're there, and what to do when it's time to exit. Jen, it's time to start the show. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Daren Hardesty.
And that may sound like a surprising voice to you if you missed the introduction. Angie's under the weather. We're happy to have Daren. He's our associate advisor, one of 4 or 5 that we have at the Financial Enhancement Group. But he is my sidekick and the one that is in almost every meeting with me that I have. And it's just a pure pleasure to have you here, buddy.
Thank you, Joe.
All right. So we are going to talk about what I call the 3 phases of finance as they surround your 401k options or opportunities, as you may put them. The theme of the whole show this week is a plan with a purpose. So when you go into any battlefield, you know that as a baseball coach,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
When you go into anything, you're going to do better if you have a plan of how you're going to attack it than if you just kind of go up, I'm going to swing the ball hard or swing the bat hard, right?
Yeah.
I understand golf a whole lot more than baseball.
That's right.
Not that I'm any better than the other, but at least I understand the concept. So, Daren, what are the 3 phases of finance that we all go through?
The first is accumulation. It's generally when it's most important, the amount that you're putting in is consistent. And you're not worried too much about returns. You're mostly focused on making sure you're getting tax diversified in your investments and putting in a consistent amount while you're working.
And we're going to come back to this, by the way. So keep going. Preservation.
The second is preservation, and that's when your return on your investment is most important. That's when the amount you're putting in does not mean as much as what you're actually getting in your return.
And why is that?
It's the interest that you're earning is going to be larger than the actual contribution that you're making.
And that's the best way to define preservation, when the amount you've already accumulated matters more than the amount that you're still adding. That doesn't mean stop adding.
Right.
Now, I've spent my entire life, my career, working on the third, which is what?
Distribution.
How do you get it out, right?
Yes.
You have to have a plan with a purpose. My friend Ed Slott, you can find him at irahelp.com, will tell you it doesn't matter the score at halftime. It doesn't matter the score at the end of the third quarter. It only matters if you win the game. And you're only going to win if you can get it back out and use it, or your heirs can use it. Pick one. Right? But at some point in time, you will exit your retirement plan.
Yeah, and since I've been at FEG, accumulating and preserving, it seems to be, I don't want to call it simple, but if you have any discipline, you can put money into accounts, you're going to accumulate, you're going to have a certain amount of income or a certain amount of money at the end of the journey. But when you get to that distribution, really knowing how taxes work, it plays a huge part. What I think most people come in is they don't realize how much an account that has $1 million in a 401k is much different than an account with $1 million in a Roth IRA, for example. So knowing how to get that money out and keep you in a preferential tax code, having the ability to set you up to do that, it's a big part of what we do.
And so going back to that accumulation phase, you said tax diversification.
Correct.
So you have 2 goals, and he hit them right on, well-trained soldier. 1, saving the right percentage of your income. And then the younger you are, the less you have to save. You just have to do it consistently. The older you are, the more you have to start. When you begin to start the program, the more you have to save. But tax diversification, what does that mean, Daren?
It means the accounts that you're putting your money into, they're all, depending on what the account is, it's going to be taxed differently. The 401k that we're focusing on right now, that's a pre-tax account. So everything
Could be.
If it's not a Roth 401k.
Could have a Roth option. There you go.
But if a traditional 401k, 403b plan, you're going to see all the money that you get to put in there will not be taxed. And
not taxed when?
When you put the money in.
Today.
It's
So
hidden
today.
from, correct. It's not taxed today, but it will be taxed at some point when you take it out during that distribution phase. So that plays that's an important thing to do to be able to hide some income from the IRS now. There are scenarios where it makes a lot of sense to do that. Another type of tax diversification we already mentioned is the Roth. Mm-hmm. The Roth works nearly the exact same way, except in every other way it's the same, except when you put money in, that money has already been taxed, or it's going to be taxed as it goes in. So you're giving up taxes today so that you don't have to pay taxes on the earnings and distributions later.
So Bob Powell asked me yesterday, he's the Robert Powell is the writer for the USA Today and the street.com, which I've written for multiple times in both cases. But the question was, would you still recommend a Roth conversion with the change? And so what I laid out for him was the Secure Act, long before COVID was part of our lives. The Secure Act was introduced in December of 2019, and it eliminated what we call the stretch IRA, right? So you still have the ability to be able to pass IRA savings and Roth IRA savings, and 401k is the same thing in this sense. You're still able to pass those on to beneficiaries, but they have to drain the account at the end of 10 years. And so the question is the Roth conversion still as important as it once was? And the answer to that is perhaps even more so. One of the things you'll hear me talk about in legacy planning is that not all beneficiaries are created equal. Right? You've got some that are addicts. You've got some that are broke. You've got some that are wealthy. You've got some that just could care less to have, you could very easily have 15 children with 15 different situations. And yet most estate plans will divide the money equally, presuming that they're all the same,
right?
Because we want to be fair, right? Leaving money behind the same way is not necessarily being fair to everyone. You need to understand as you're building your retirement plan, as you're building that 401k, a plan with a purpose, as you're building that IRA or making the contributions to your Roth IRA, you need to understand that not all accounts are created equal. And if you don't know where it is you want to go, and there's a great Yogi Berra quotation here, right? If you don't know where you're going, you may just wind up there, right? I thought as a baseball guy, you might appreciate that.
I do appreciate that, yeah.
And there are a lot of versions to that one, by the way. Anyhow, the point being, you want to know where it is you want to wind up. And so you can be looking at a 401k plan as just a place you're trying to park money, just because you want to say you have $1 million or $500,000 or whatever it is. But in truth, this is your retirement plan. This is the pension plan for the 2000s. Right? You've got to put money into it. You want to put money in the right place and do your best with it.
Yeah, and so we've mentioned the 401k, the pre-tax accounts, the Roth options, and then there's also brokerage accounts, which are taxable accounts in terms of capital gains, but it's not going to be taxed at ordinary income rates. So a good diversification, depending on what your needs are, it's really important that you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. That you're setting yourself up to diversify and have, an equal share, as you've said many times. Having a third in each one of those types of accounts is a really good plan to have if you're able to get there when you get to retirement. It allows people like us to create a really well thought out and manageable plan for retirement.
And you don't know what the IRS is going to do in the future. I mean, you just don't, right? So having that diversification today from the beginning, having that plan from the beginning, allows you to play chess, not just checkers, with the IRS when it's time.
Yeah, and something I hear a lot when you look at your retirement statement, so your 401k statement, if you have a Roth option, they'll always give you that total amount. And I've heard you in many meetings talk about how that should be a crime, but because of how those number of the dollars that you see are not all the same. You have to always take out the taxes or take the taxes into account to make sure you really know what that true value is.
All accounts are not created equal.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Hey, we have a question from Pam in Frankfurt. She's asking if a 401k, a 403b, and a 457b, what are the differences? What are the similarities?
Wow. We don't have enough time to hit all of those. I will tell you that a 401k is a defined contribution plan that I refer to as defined distribution because it will come out at your hand or the IRS's. 403b is the same thing, except that's for not-for-profit entities. It tends to be teachers, hospitals, places like that. 457, anytime you see that, tends to be a municipality or where a local government is the one that's sponsoring them. Almost all of those plans are based on tax deferral. Some of them have, as Daren indicated, a Roth option that you can have where you can actually pay the taxes on the money before they go in. 457s tend to let you take the money out sooner than some of the age restrictions that you may hear about in an IRA. And you could add that, Pam. It's a great question, by the way. Thank you. You could add that to the mix. They're all ways of saving and accumulating money. In this case, these three are all Department of Labor plans typically. Don't have to be, but they typically are driven by the way the Department of Labor constructs them. And they're all obviously part of an employer plan, hence the word DOL or Department of Labor. IRAs, by the way, are things you do on your own. But the tax nature, Daren, can, as you know, be very much the same. And so 457s, many times you don't have the issues of required minimum distributions. and you're kind of stuck with the plan in most cases, whereas in a 403b or a 401k, you do have the ability to convert those to IRAs. And once you get it to an IRA, even if they don't have a Roth option, you have the ability to build that tax diversification. And folks, it's never too late. My oldest Roth conversion was 4 years ago, and the person was 92. Right? So it's never too late. And when Mr. Powell asked me the question, are Roth conversions still a valuable thing? The answer is absolutely yes, and perhaps more so. Because just as I say, accounts are not all created equal, beneficiaries are not created equal, and you want to know who's going to inherit what, when, and why. And you need to have a conversation with them so that they understand what their tax impact is going to be. The last number we had was 2016, but it was more than 68% of IRA accounts were not touched until people were forced to take money out of them because of required minimum distributions. You're going to have kids that inherit your money, Daren, that are going to take it out and spend it on a Ferrari the day they get it. They're going to take it and they're going to pay off their house the day they get it. And you're going to have others that hoard it for 10 years. And they're going to have a tax nightmare that they don't even understand is coming. Folks, we hope you are having an absolutely happy Christmas season in this crazy world of COVID. Do not forget, we are still here. We are still working. We're making appointments now. You can call. Angie will be back in at 800-928-4001. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting or go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Yourlifeafterwork.com. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. Call Angie at 800-928-4001. We'll take a break and be right back. All right, Daren, your first radio segment. How do you feel?
Hey, I have to give a shout out to Steve Cherry.
Okay.
Steve Cherry, he ran the radio department at Pendleton Heights for many years. And, with all these flashbacks of running a radio program, doing play-by-play, it's all coming back. So,
well, there you go, buddy.
Steve Cherry,
you did fine.
Thank you.
Andy in the sound booth would be saying project.
Project.
All right, project, right?
I got to work on it,
Think about somebody getting ready to steal first base that you really don't want to go.
Yeah,
right?
I can do that.
Project,
okay.
Right? That doesn't mean holler in the microphone. All right, buddy, what's next?
We're going to be talking about trusts. Should you have a trust as a part of your estate plan?
Okay. All right, so if I was going to summarize that for a podcast segment, Andrew, I would say trusts are tools. Sometimes you need hammers, sometimes you need pliers, and sometimes you need screwdrivers. Do you always need a trust?
No.
No would be the answer.
Yes.
But we can't put that in the tag, right? All right, Jen, we're ready. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Daren Hardesty.
I don't even know what to call you right now. He is our associate advisor at the Financial Enhancement Group, one of 4 or 5 very, very talented people that we have that are in that position. Certainly my sidekick, Angie Kinzer, is under the weather, and so we've got, instead of having the average Joe, my sidekick Angie, we actually have a trained Joe, Daren Hardesty, that's in studio with us tonight. So it's a little bit different. Our theme for the whole show is a plan with a purpose. And Daren has asked me the question, and we get this a lot, is it necessary to have a trust as part of your legacy plan? So I'll let you go ahead and tee up the questions.
Okay. Well, when people come in for meetings with us, it seems to be a very usual topic. We ask, do you have a trust? Have you established anything? And obviously some people have, some people haven't. Some people, though, are adamant that they think they don't need a trust. They've always been given advice that they don't need a trust. What triggers do you see that would make you feel like a family would should really consider looking into creating a trust?
So again, let's go back and I think Genesis matters. A lot of people say it's, doesn't really matter. Genesis matters. I got into the financial services industry 32 years ago because of estate planning, because I watched the tax code in 1984 and 85 rip apart 2 farm families. That got changed in 86. It's been altered a lot. It's clearly better now than it was then, right? But it's still dangerous. So a trust, very similar to a hammer, does not put a nail in the wall. right? Now, it may be the best tool to get said nail into the wall, right? But a lot of people will tell you that you use a trust to reduce federal estate taxes or a host of other issues. And it gives you the opportunity to do some things. The biggest reason is not for estate tax reduction for the most part with a normal, what you have and what you see in our office and what Barb and I have is called a grantor trust, right? We are humans. We made a gift to a trust, and that trust takes care of the stuff that we have when we're no longer capable of taking care of it ourselves or when we're dead, right? Remember, both sides of that matter. Do not forget the A-B equation, right? The last 2 minutes of a football game may matter the most, right? But there's still a whole lot left of the game to be played, and that's kind of the way I look at it when we're alive, but we can't necessarily make the best decisions for ourselves, either mentally or physically, sometimes both, right?
Right. And
then you die. So why do I have a trust? Probably the best way to start that question. You have a trust. Some people do it, very few anymore, in my opinion, but some people do it for privacy, right? Where a will is very, very public knowledge, a trust is very, very private, right? So you do it for privacy. The second reason you do it is for control. I love my daughters. Barb's going to tell me I got their ages wrong, but I think it's 28 and 24 now. That's close. They're 4 years apart, right?
Sure.
I don't need them inheriting, if Barb and I were taken out in an accident, a company that I spent 32 years of my life building and them getting all of those assets at one time.
Right.
That is not good for them, right? That is not in their best interest, okay? And so you have to think about that. So part of what a trust does is says, when I'm gone, here's how I want my assets treated. And you can pretty much inside of that do anything that you want done, right? It's people will say, well, can I do this in a trust or can I do that in a trust? Well, if the attorney is creative enough and you know precisely what it is you want, there's not a lot of things you can't do. Now, the challenge, Daren, and Daren was a baseball coach for years and years, so I try to put stuff in terminology that he understands, and I know very little about it. We buried my dad in a Cubs jacket because he loved baseball. I grew up watching the Cincinnati Reds because we lived in Muncie. That's it. Yep. That's my extent, right?
Yep.
But there are different things that you would do in different settings on a baseball field, right? There's different times where you have people steal a base where the other guy that was slower, you would go, that's a bad plan, right?
Sure.
We have different strategies, and almost all of those strategies can be put inside of a trust. The one thing that I would strongly discourage people from doing is just having a pre-made trust that, this boilerplate where somebody says that they are an attorney that does estate planning. And I don't mean this disrespectful to any of my attorney friends. I got a lot of them, right? But if you do a divorce at 10, a lawsuit at noon, and try to say you can write a trust at 3, I respectfully disagree that is an estate plan. That is just a document.
Absolutely. Okay? Yeah. And what I've noticed, and I'm very, like you've mentioned, I was a teacher before, and there's so many things that I've had the opportunity to learn. What I've noticed a lot is the trustee, the successor trustee. Just to kind of elaborate on that, a successor trustee is who takes over when the trustee has died or is mentally unable,
incapacitated,
or missing.
Is the legal word you're
is missing also?
Missing is actually one of those that's out there before somebody's declared dead. That would be correct.
So what I've noticed is that the successor trustees rarely understand or have gone through the trust prior to the time that they take over. Is there would you have any advice for would you communicate those things with your successor trustees to make sure that they know what your wishes are?
So there's 3 ways to do this. And as Daren knows, and he's kind of thrown me a lob ball here, I write letters to my trust, right? So there are things that I want my successor trustees to know that I just don't necessarily want them to know today, right? Mm-hmm. And part of that's because I get frustrated or challenged. This has been a tough year on me and other people, not business wise. It's been the emotional. Not seeing my mom for a year is not over a year. not seeing my daughter for Christmas and my birthday.
Yeah.
It's not been a normal year, right? So I write letters that I may very well change my mind. But you can add letters of instruction to your trustee and get them clarified. Now, we've got an interesting case going on right now that Daren and I are working on where the lady that passed away, who I loved dearly, for the record, made a lot of notes, handwritten, and then had them notarized. And the bottom line is that they're different than what she verbally told me, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm a disinterested third party. I'm not one of the charities that's receiving money. I'm not one of the beneficiaries, nor should I be. So it's interesting. Does my word count? And the answer is no, for the record. Or does this notarized document that she wrote count, right? Yep. And so part of the process and the procedure of this stuff needs to be very, very clear. And again, you need to have people who are adamant about what's going on. And the attorney that we work with, Tom Beeman in this case, is going to run it through the court and get it on a court docket and let the judge decide so that every I's dotted, T's crossed, and we don't have to, try to figure that out. But one is I write letters to the trust to try to give my trustees direction. The second is, I do this, I have family meetings with people who are going to be the successor trustees. So the kids understand this is why mom and dad laid it out the way you did. You want to get mad at me. I'm the one that told them to do it. Don't get mad at them later on.
Right.
But I think crystal clarification of intent prior to somebody passing makes life a whole lot easier, right? It's Adam Harder, our chief investment officer, had me read a book a few years ago called Fierce Conversations. And I don't know that you necessarily need to be fierce, but I think the clearer you are with your beneficiaries before there can be any confusion, hard feelings, and everything else, the better off you really are. And the third is the one that happens the most, and that's where people don't know a thing, right? Yep. I totally disagree, for the record, but most attorneys will tell you that your kids can be your successor trustees. I don't believe, after 32 years of doing a lot more of these than most people do, I get to deal with the beneficiaries. Right?
Yes.
And I'm telling you, when you have a trustee who also gets to use the capital, the assets that are in there, good and bad, there are just challenges.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's just my opinion. Not an attorney. Don't play one on TV or radio.
Well, and if you are a successor trustee, and if you know that's going to be your role, and let's say it's a significant estate, greater than the average person. What I've found in my experience is that there's a lot that confusion on the successor trustee side. They, of all people, should have the best understanding of what is actually happening, and whether that's on the attorney or having a good financial advisor that can provide that. I think it's really important that those people walk into the job, because it is a job, right, knowing as much as possible.
So nobody knows this, including Barb, who's going to be shocked. As of this year, I am legally able, as Financial Enhancement Group, not as Joe Clark, though I'm the only one who does it in the firm, to be able to be a corporate successor trustee. We've got over $500 million we manage. I've done this for a long time as a CFP. Can't do it for everybody, but we are helping people, especially with IRA and 401k assets, to do this. I am, however, putting together a class. That's the part nobody knows. I am going to put together a class that probably won't qualify for CE, but maybe the CPA Society will accept it. They've accepted me for other programs to teach people how to be successor trustees. Here's what you need to know: your playbook of what you've signed up for, because it's a big responsibility.
Absolutely.
Much more so than people. A lot of people have the best of intention. But in a legal world where there is so much muck that is out there and confusion and lack of clarity, it is easy for this to go astray, right? So I'm going to put together the class. Not sure how we're going to put it out there to people. I'm not sure who I'm going to put it out there to, but I am going to create the class so that you will have it. If you want to be able to participate in that, you just need to let us know. Call Angie at 800-928-4001. Or go to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com. While you're there, get signed up for our Next Steps meeting. We're going to give you things to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it into writing. That's our promise. 800-928-4001. We'll be right back. All right, buddy. Nicely done. And there is no way, Daren, no way a person in a year should know as much as you know.
I've got a great team. I told you, I'm so blessed. I was a coach, and I got to see what it's like to be a coach and see the big picture. And a teacher, when you're on that outside, when you get that experience, you really learn the value of the team. And FEG is a great team. So a lot of questions throughout the year. There's always questions, and there's just always somebody available to help answer. So
if you don't have questions next year, you're doing something wrong.
yeah.
just for the record,
it's probably the same questions over and over.
Well, no, they don't. They're not necessarily the same questions, but 32 years later, it is. I feel so bad for people that have had to try to figure that believe they have figured this out once and are done. You know, I've had to darn near memorize 4 different major economies, right? In terms of the way bull markets have worked and bear markets have worked and what's going on with the Federal Reserve and how all of that goes down. And then you go through the same stuff with the nightmare of what goes on in the tax code.
Yeah.
You put those two together and you've got a career ahead of you. Right?
I don't know how anybody could do it on their own. I mean, at least it's just, you're going to miss stuff even when you have a full team.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that is a wonderful thing that we are all working together to help make sure that we're always getting the right answers, or the best answers
brother.
for our families.
All right. What's the next topic?
We're going to be looking at a plan for starting your own business. How do you put that plan together?
So if I was going to summarize that, thinking about the theme, a plan with a purpose, I would always ask what it is you're trying to accomplish with the business, right? I mean, some people, depending on when you start your business, some people are starting it out with a passion. They always want to make coffee cups, right? I love Shark Tank, for the record, right? You know, their plan was, I wanted to do this. Nobody would hire me to do it, so I will build a company to do it, right? My plan, in all fairness, when I looked at my parents arguing, and they didn't do it a lot, but when they did, it was almost always based on money. And so my focus was, okay, how can I eliminate strife in families? How can I get rid of that? And so my plan really was a purpose. We just happened to wind up being, you know, we just got, I don't say this bragging. It just, you know, kind of baffled me because it's just in my passion. But, you know, the RIA Institute went through and came up with the 50 top emerging registered investment advisory firms in the nation, and we're 13th. And it was just, you know, it's very, very cool to watch that, but that was not my purpose. Right. So, you know, when you ask this question, I think you have to try to go to that end game. No different than we talk about a retirement account. When you put your first dollar in an IRA or a 401k, you need to be asking yourself, what do I want that critter to do? Right? And when you're starting a company, you got to do the same thing. Okay?
Yep.
Jen, here we go. Good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Daren Hardesty.
Happy to have you along. Hey, we are talking about a plan with a purpose, and this is one of the things that is very, very near and dear to my heart. It's starting your own business. So I'll let Daren take it from there, and he can ask questions and give you answers.
Well, you know, in America, it's one of the greatest places to start a business.
No, that would be the greatest place.
Come on. Yeah, of course. But the entrepreneurial spirit in
My
America.
Canadian people just went nuts, by the way.
That's right. So what is it about America? What is it about the American spirit that makes us, in your opinion, Joe, just briefly, what is it about Americans that we're so good at wanting to start businesses and take those risks to accomplish something?
It's, so Cameron Harold is a friend of mine in one of my masterminds, and he's the number 1, number 2 guy in the world. His job is to work with business owners who are between 5 and 500 million of revenue for a company, and deal with Don and Adam and everybody who has to deal with me, right? 3% of the population, when scored, test as entrepreneurial. that is astronomically higher than any other society in any other country in the world. Canada gets close, right? And Cameron does a really good job of explaining this. He said, what kind of fool would get on a boat to go into an ocean that was potentially flat to try to find a new place, to try a new thing, and give up everything that they had known before? By definition, that is kind of what entrepreneurs do, right? When you are starting a company and you're trying to build one, you are going into uncharted and unknown territory. And if I would have known everything that I would have gone through when we started the company, I can honestly tell you I probably still would have done it, but I would have done it more calculated.
Sure.
Right? Then just kind of going, here's a great idea. 1997, we're going to start a financial planning firm in Anderson, where the New York Times is getting ready to say the city's defunct because General Motors is going to pull out. Probably not the wisest decision you would make on paper, but that's what an entrepreneur is. That's kind of how we happen. And it's why there's 28 others of you that are on a team that provide the other side of the deal.
Right. So kind of going back to our theme of having a plan, how important is the plan, and do you have to have a well thought out, structured business plan that you might learn about getting your MBA, for example? How important is that, and how much is it really needed?
If you're going to raise capital from bankers and other investors, you probably need to have a strategic plan of some nature, right? One of the things that we're looking at doing is acquiring CPA practices. You know that. Mm-hmm. The detailed writing that I have with that is probably more well thought out, more developed than what I did when I started the firm, right? If you're doing it with your own capital, I think you need to know where your direction is and where you're going. You don't necessarily need to have it well written out, because week to week the plan has to adjust, right? We did not know in 97 there was going to be a tech wreck in 2000.
Right.
We did not know GM was actually going to leave, the community that we were in. We didn't know there was going to be a 2008, 2009 housing crisis that took the world into a recession of deep despair. Mm-hmm. We didn't know about a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And so the further along you go, the less you have to adjust, or pivot is the word for 2020. The less you have to adjust on a dime, but you still have to be prepared to make changes, right? When you're younger and you're starting out, you have to be willing to adjust. So I think you need to have a structure, right? I think you still need to know, as a plan with a purpose, to follow the theme. I still think you need to know where you want to wind up eventually, what your genesis was, why are you doing this? But you don't necessarily need to have every I dotted and T crossed, because they will change. Yeah. Right. So one of the generals that Adam and I met, I think it was General Zinni, made the statement that there is no war there's no battle that's ever been won without a battle plan, and no battle plan that's ever made it to the field. Yeah. Right. Now, whether both of those are accurate or not, he said them, and I get it. Right? Same. We get stronger by preparing for football games, for golf outings, for baseball games, I'm sure. Oh, right? Yeah. It doesn't, things are going to change. Right umpires are going to make bad calls, right? Yep. Golf balls are going to get lost, and people are going to get injured.
Yeah. But having that plan allows you to control what can be controlled as much as possible. But like you said, there's always going to be those uncontrollables that you hope you can be prepared for, but there's no way you can be prepared for everything that might possibly happen.
Giuliani, in one of his speeches, mayor that was obviously mayor of New York City for you youngsters, and during the travesty on 9/11, said that we survived 9/11 not because we were ready for 2 trade centers to fall. We survived because we were prepared for Grand Central being bombed. We survived because we were ready for the harbor to be bombed or destroyed. Yeah. Right? So they had a bunch of other plans that were able to come together to be able to do it.
Yeah. So. Hey, we have a question from Matt in Logansport. He says, if I'm thinking about starting a business, what professionals do I need to include at the beginning?
Hey, Matt. Great question. And I think it depends on the size of business that you're starting. Right? So if this is you in your garage, my answer might be one thing. If you need to go hire 50 people to do the job, my answer might be another, right? In life, you do get what you pay for most of the time. And I do mean that. I mean, I have seen very incompetent people who are paid an exorbitant amount of money to provide what I consider to be very bad advice. I've also seen people who didn't charge a lot, who gave people pretty sound advice, right? So, you be careful what you're out there getting. Know what it is you want, what the job description is you want. Make sure that you're as clear as possible. But your first person that you probably need to have on your side is either a banker, depending on how much leverage or debt or capital you're going to need help getting, or a CPA who understands the tax implications of what's going on. So it is very common for me to be in a room with a couple bankers, an attorney, sometimes two attorneys. I usually bring in a CPA that is a friend of mine, along with the CPA that takes care of us financially, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Now, we're a 23, 24-year-old business that has been around for a while, and we've had a tremendous amount of success. And not everybody's going to be able to go hire that team right away. So I think your question really goes to that plan and purpose of where it is you're trying to go, Matt. Is this going to be a 5-person company? Is it going to be a 50-person company? Is it going to be a 500-person company? And then you need to know what that structure needs to be. The tax structure that you use is going to be critical, right? And the debt structure that you're going to use, the capital controls that you use, are going to be critical. They'll take a lot of pain away from tomorrow if you do them right today. So, great question. Thank you.
Another question here, Joe. It seems, since I've been here, we have business owners, small business owners, or that are in all phases. One of the phases that it seems to be popular, and your experience might be able to kind of elaborate on this, but I've heard it called an encore career, where somebody retires and then they start a business.
That gets to be that plan and purpose. We see it happen a lot with people who leave one industry and become consultants, right? You've worked for years and years and years for Eli Lilly or General Motors or someplace else, and now you take that knowledge and you go do it. Think about what happens in the White House. I mean, it's very, very, very common to find a vice president, now a consultant at another firm, right? And some people, they're just using their relationships. Yep, that's what we all do. Yeah. If you think the 1,200 families that we take care of aren't based on relationships that we have built and developed over decades, you've missed part. I don't have many people come in and go, I saw you in the phone book. That's just not where it happens, right? Yeah. Somebody else knew us or went from there. So those encores, again, knowing the plan and purpose. How are you going to wind it down, right? My father-in-law, when he left Fisher Guide, right, created a consulting company. And one day he was done. And you just wind it down, right? Yeah. He didn't have to worry about selling it, didn't have to worry about docs or documents, anything else like that.
So we also have a lot of families, too, that are at the point where they're thinking about or have sold their business. Are there any things, if you're at that point, you've been running a business, it's been successful, but you're ready to kind of take the next or go into the next phase of your life and you want to sell your business, what are some strategies or things you might, provide to a family who's in that position? So
before you sell your business, I've been very, very blessed to be in so many of these deals, from $2 million to $20 million to $100 million, where I've been able to be sometimes a big part and sometimes just a, small, being able to listen. But I will tell you, you want to be around somebody else before you sell your business. You want to be around somebody who has done this before. The people who buy businesses, and I've got friends that do both sides of this, right? And you've watched me in action on this, so right. you know. The people who buy businesses have bought a lot of them. This is probably the first business you've ever sold. They're playing chess and you're playing checkers, and they know what buttons to push, what tax codes to use. They know how to drive emotions in places where you don't want emotions to go. It was one of Daren's first meetings, I think, is when he watched me explain to a family what was going to happen within the next 60 days when somebody offered to buy their business. And when we were back with him, when the deal closed, he goes, "How in the world did you know?" And it's the same dadgum game over and over. This is what people do. And so you want somebody that's had that experience on your side. It's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to have a surgeon at that point in time, but you do have to have a strategist. And that's what I would tell you. When you go to sell a business, you're not worried just about valuation. You're worried about the strategy of the transition. And finding those people is critical and important. And if I were going to sell my company as much as I know, I would still do the same thing. I would have somebody else with you can't read the label if you're inside the jar, right?
Yep. Have
somebody else take care of you. 800-928-4001. We'll be right back. All right. Great job. So this one's going to be tough. So I got to be careful what I say to people on the radio because it's taped, and what you guys see is not. It's you get to see it, but it's in a 3-week period of time. Actually, now 4 weeks. We lost somebody in our company that I've taken care of for more than 20 years, who I love dearly. We've lost one of my best friend's fathers, COVID, and I had a 56-year-old killed in a car wreck that I spent the last 18 years of my life with, at least twice a month, having breakfast. And as they say in a small group, if you know anything about church, he knew where all the bodies were buried. So it's like losing part of your soul. And it ain't easy, but it is stuff that we have to talk about. So Daren, I can't tell you where we'll wind up with this conversation, but you can tell me the title so I can give Andy the tag.
Gotcha. So this is about Plan B. What do you do when unexpected things happen in life?
Mm-hmm. So if I was going to think about Plan B, the first thing that I would have is a Plan B, right? Keith Cunningham wrote a great book, 2018, 2019, I think it's called The Road Less Stupid. And if you're going to own a business, read the book, right? You'll thank me for it. That's a joke. You have to read the book to get it. But he will tell you, Daren, that all entrepreneurs ask themselves, what could possibly go right?
Sure.
He will tell you that average entrepreneurs will tell you what could go wrong. He said, but only exceptional entrepreneurs will ask you if you can live with what going wrong actually meant to your business. Can you live with the worst possible thing? And as you know, as you've watched, I try to make decisions based on those 3 questions because I think they're the right way to structure them. I can't tell you that I always have a Plan B anymore. I'm more of the type that burnt the ships, right, that we learned about in history class years ago. That doesn't mean that I haven't gone through and analyzed what's the best, worst, and can I live with the worst right before I do it.
Sure.
So there you go. All right, Jen. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I am Daren Hardesty.
In absence is Angie Kinzer, a little under the weather, but we will have her back for certain. Daren, so happy to have you. The topic for the whole show today is a plan with a purpose. And this segment is about what?
This is about Plan B. What do you do to prepare when things that you're not ready for occur in your life?
And most things will occur that you didn't anticipate.
Good and bad.
As Adam and I used to tell people a lot, Adam's our chief investment officer and one of my partners, and we remind people as we manage portfolios, we have to take care of all of the things that didn't happen, right? Mm-hmm. So and I don't know if I've ever used this analogy with you before, but it's, your kids aren't old enough, but let's say Kaylee or Kendra and one of your kids get in a car race to Indianapolis. And my daughter goes 100 miles an hour, but she wins the race, right? As daddies, we do not jump out of the car and high-five her, right? Because we have seen dead people, right? We know the potholes. We know the blowouts. We know the police, right? We know other cars doing things you didn't expect, right? But what happens to so many of us in life is we only see the result. Now, just to impress you as a math person, one of the challenges with this is a statistical thing called survivorship bias, right? You're only able to analyze the people who actually survived the race, right? And so we have a tendency when we look at portfolios as individuals, when you look at portfolios, when you look at businesses that worked out, right? We tend to think, well, that must have been the right way. And, there's so many things have happened in our lives that we have to understand were by divine intervention, grace of God, luck, call it what you will, right? The Financial Enhancement Group, our company, has been very, very, very blessed. We've made some very, very good decisions, but there's some that I probably in the last 23 years could have made better, right?
Sure.
Where there are other companies that probably made really good decisions too that just didn't happen to make it.
Yeah.
And for me not to acknowledge that is not fair. We won the award, I think it was 3 years ago, for Entrepreneur of the Year for Madison County. And, I spent the whole time talking about a company that we built that didn't work. Because nobody asks what's wrong when it looks like it did work.
Yeah.
Right? You only ask what's wrong when it didn't work.
Yeah. When you're winning, you don't see all the flaws.
Yeah.
So, in terms of what we do, and, what I think a lot of people, when they think of a plan B, how can they be prepared? Insurance is typical, something that people consider if you were to lose your job or if there's an unexpected death. What types of insurance, outside of life insurance, are there any other insurances that you would encourage somebody to look into if they were to lose a job, or the potential of losing a job?
So the best, and we talked about this earlier on the phone today, the best insurance that you can have for losing a job if you do not work for yourself, right? The best insurance you can have is margin, as Andy Stanley would say it at North Point Ministries. Making sure that you don't have too much of your time, energy, or money invested in one area so that you have margin in case the unexpected occurred. Okay? Mm-hmm. In financial world, we call that an emergency fund. I would call it having less debt, right? Yep. The debt that Barb and I have are debt that either is helping to build wealth or the capital somewhere else that's being used in a different fashion. And we're fortunate enough to do that. I'll be 54 by the time you guys hear this. For the most of you, it's Christmas Eve is my birthday, and here comes Christmas. So that's one of them that's out there. But the other biggest one that I think that's missed is probably on the property and casualty side, and that's an umbrella policy. That I see. We regularly see families come in that have $1 million to $2 million in assets and don't have an umbrella policy that's, I think $200 to $400 a year is probably what I see as the norm for most of them. That to me, that is an excessive ignorance of capital, right? And I don't mean that as probably as rudely as it sounds. It's when you have assets that you've saved and accumulated, you've got to figure out what's the best way to protect that fortress that you built, right? So we talked about trust. The legal documents that you have to have. We talked about making sure you have the right tax planning to go along with it, to make sure that you understand that you have a plan with a purpose, so you're thinking about the exit. The other part of that is, okay, somebody, for some reason, sues me even though I didn't do anything wrong, right? I mean, Barb and I were driving down the road the other day. It was 11 o'clock at night. We were coming back, and I kid you not, somebody in black clothing at night was walking 2 or 3 yards into the middle of the road, right? Mm-hmm. And I would have been at fault, right? No way around it.
Yeah.
Right. That's just not a risk that we should be taking, nor should most of you who are listening to the show.
So an umbrella policy, let's say you have auto insurance, you have homeowners insurance, and it has a certain amount of coverage. The umbrella policy comes in and takes care of, as soon as you max out that auto insurance, if there's a car accident, for example, and there's additional cost, and that umbrella policy comes in to take over the rest.
Just think about an umbrella and put all of the other stuff under it. You typically have to have the maximum amount of coverage that you can have for the other things, right? You can't have a bare bones car policy and then expect an umbrella policy to work. Mm-hmm. And they're typically provided by the same carrier, though that's not always true. But yeah, that's one of them. Plan B to me really is thinking about those 3 questions. What's the worst that can happen? And can you live with the worst? And I don't want any of you listening to the show living in fear. All right, I have my Santa Claus, I believe, shirt on for those of you who are not able to see on the streaming video from 5 to 6 p.m. on Tuesday nights. I don't want any of you living in fear, but I do want you to be prepared and protected to be able to take care of yourself and others that are around you in the event that something goes astray, right? I do not have a spare tire on my Jeep because I want to change the tire, right? I have a spare tire in case I have to change the tire on my Jeep.
Gotcha. What about disability insurance, long-term, short-term disability?
Yeah, so this is one of the interesting things. You know, it's more people have life insurance policies than disability policies. And you know, when I used to teach at Purdue and I would see the kids come in, I would tell them, it's like, listen, do you know why more life insurance policies are sold than disability policies? And they go, real simple. One is sold, one is bought. Right? One is sold, one is bought. Life insurance policies are sold to people typically, especially young people. You know, if you're 25 to 30 years old, you're not married, you don't have any kids, you have no liability for anyone. Right? In America, that is the way the world works. Right? You have no reason to own life insurance at that point in time. You probably have a little bit with your employer to be able to pay for the funeral expenses. But what you do have an issue with is long-term care disability in the event something were to happen to you. You know, we've just lost a friend recently in Benton County over this, but you know, we've got at least one other person I know that's, you know, going to be disabled the rest of his life for hitting a deer. Right? I mean, how do you factor that into the equation other than, you know, looking at what can happen in part B, right? You know, plan B if something doesn't go as planned. So I would strongly encourage the disability coverage. There's some great carriers that are out there. We don't sell products, so you can't call and ask me and say, which one should I buy? That's not what we do. But our team will help you in any way we can, try to get you attached to the right people.
As an employer, are you required to offer disability or life insurance?
We're not required to do anything at our size as employers. You have a 401k, you have life insurance that is part of it, you have health insurance that's offered to you. Those are all by choices that we make as owners of the Financial Enhancement Group to say this is a good thing. We have long-term disability coverage that's offered to people that some take and some don't. Right?
Yeah.
So it's subsidized, but it's not. It's still something where you've got to have a little bit of skin in the game. But you do need to know when you go to work for a company, you do need to ask the questions. You know, I always tell, and I could be wrong, but you know, when you came to work at the Financial Enhancement Group, you wanted to know, okay, what benefit package do I have? Right?
Sure. Yeah.
I would tell you if you're going to see a financial planner, I would ask what benefit package they offer. Right? There is probably a difference between a company that does all of the things that we provide you than somebody who doesn't provide any of that. Right?
Yeah.
I want 100% participation in our 401k, so we put the 3% in. Right? And then you put more money in on top of it. You know, but I would ask that. You know, I worry about the painter's porch that's never painted. Right? It's an old expression, but I worry about that stuff. So you know, I have done my best to keep our house in order financially, you know, because I think that's the right thing for you to see, right? If you came in and knew that I was trying to figure out how to pay the bills, it might create a little bit of a challenge, right, before you got here. I want to be able to hire the best people and to be able to work with families that think and act like I do to the best of our ability.
So spinning it a little bit, and we can't go too deep into this, but let's say a positive, unexpected item occurs, an inheritance, lottery. Is there anything that you would recommend if you are somebody who receives a large amount of money unexpectedly? Yeah,
the answer that my industry would give you is do nothing until you've waited for 30 to 90 days to let it set in. That is really bad advice. Don't buy anything like an annuity or, remember the people who are delivering the check, if it's from a life insurance policy, are also there to sell you something. Many of the worst financial decisions in terms of buying things I have seen have come in the moment of despair, right? When you're getting a check from a spouse or a kid that's been, you know, unexpectedly taken. However, the tax code does not work the same way, right? That if something happened to you this week, your spouse may only have the rest of this year to do a married file and joint tax return, which could amount to thousands and thousands of dollars paid to the IRS. If they've got a minor child, you've got one more year. But it does matter how you do this and how you look at it.
Sure.
So, hey, go to our website, yourlifeafterwork.com. We look forward to meeting you. Get signed up for your Next Steps meeting. It's complimentary, and we would love to meet you. 800-928-4001. We'll be right back. Okay, I made it through that.
You did. You did.
But anyhow, it's one of the challenges that I'm would normally be concerned with. If something happens to a spouse, people don't understand as you've watched, do not understand what it means to say married filing jointly and what it means when somebody's gone. You've got that year. That's it. Unless you happen to have a minor child. And if you have a minor child, you get one more special year. Yeah. Right? So let's get it straight.
So we're in the outro, correct?
We're in the outro.
Okay. So
These technical terms that we use at FEG.
We have
Intros and outros.
That's right. So we have two options here. We can talk about a question we got from Nathan about student loan debt, which I vote for.
Well, then that's the answer.
reasons,
Okay,
but
Jim. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Daren Hardesty.
And we are happy to have you. I need you to know who Daren Hardesty is. Those of you who have listened to the show know who I am. I've been doing this show for well over 20 years. And the managing partner at the Financial Enhancement Group. Daren is one of our associate advisors and one of my favorite people on the planet. And he has a commitment to helping people who find themselves experiencing student debt. So I will let you ask and answer the question.
All right. So Nathan emailed in this week, and he said, if you can pay off student loans right away, should you? Or should you pay them off slowly and allow credit to build? And I've learned multiple ways that you can approach this depending. Student loan debt, in my opinion, is something you want to get off your plate and hopefully never have before you go to college. I know there's differing ways you could look at this. I think financially you could argue that it might make sense to pay it off slowly and use the capital for other things. But for me and in my home, student loans have been a burden on our lives since college. And Nathan, if I could encourage you, I would attack the student loan as quickly as possible and get it out of the way as soon as possible so that you can use that cash flow moving forward. I shared with Joe last night that my wife and I were able to completely pay off our student loans this year, just yesterday, over almost, since we've been married, almost $100,000 paid off. And we couldn't be happier with taking or sacrificing some of that money to get our loans taken care of. So now we can move forward and hopefully remain debt-free other than our home for as long as possible and teach some of the things that we've learned through this process to our kids and move forward from there.
I never thought that the best Christmas present I could get would come from one of my team telling me what you told me in that text message last night, and just watching the freedom that you feel that you're experiencing. But I think that comes true of all debt. And Nathan, I would add that everybody's situation is different, and it is a matter of how debt is used, right? So having debt to go to Disney, not a good plan. Having debt to open a business, if done constructively, can be a different story. Leverage is not all equal any more than heirs or beneficiaries. But Daren, we are proud of you and Morgan, and I'm so glad to have you as part of our family. Thank you,
Joe.
Thank you for being here,
Yeah,
and thank you all for being here. Remember, if you got a question or comment, go to 800-928-4001, ask for Angie, or yourlifeafterwork.com. Have a very Merry Christmas, folks. See you again next year. It's been an interesting year, folks. For those of you who are watching this video, and I know there's not a lot of you that watch it live yet, we have a lot of people who watch it taped, and happy to have you. So it may be in January when you see it. I will tell you that it has been a great year in terms of the questions and the responses that we have. I hope to meet each and every one of you, if I don't already know, by the time we get through the end of 2021. That I wish you nothing but the greatest of holidays. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll see you again soon.